I'm Pedro, and this is the Green Earth Podcast by DGB Group. When talking about nature and wildlife preservation, the conversation usually gravitates around compromises. It's common to believe that in order to move towards sustainability, we need to compromise economic or social development. And the other way around as well. If we want to focus on development, we'll compromise nature. But what if someone tried to find a solution that's beneficial for everyone? Let's say if we were trying to save the natural habitat of chimpanzees living in close proximity to humans, would it be possible to make it so both humans and chimps benefit from each other's presence? This is what we're currently trying to achieve with the Bulindi Chimpanzee Restoration Project in Uganda. And to learn more about it, I had a conversation with the project director, Dr. Matt McLennan.
Yeah, I'm a primatologist. I study chimpanzees, and for the past nearly 20 years now, I've been studying and conserving wild chimpanzees in Western Uganda, but specifically where they occur outside of protected areas, not in national parks, not in government-run forest reserves, but where they occur, I would say, in village environments. My focus has been how do chimps and people coexist where they live in really close proximity.
Before we dive into the actual project, it's important to understand the general picture of what's going on in the Bulindi region in Uganda. So if you were to go back hundreds of years and walk around the area that is known as New York City today, you'd probably see lots of different things. No skyscrapers, obviously, but also lots of black bears, gray wolves, mountain lions, elks, bobcats, deers, and many other animals that are not seen there anymore because, well, there's a huge city there now. What happened in New York hundreds of years ago is happening in Uganda now. The country is developing. Villages are growing into towns and towns are becoming cities.
Yeah, Uganda is changing really fast. It's developing quickly. People's standard of living is increasing, and the landscape is changing completely. What's happened in Uganda, and it's obviously it's mirrored across tropical Africa and probably lots of parts of the world. What's happened is natural forest that is unprotected has been cleared by local farmers and converted into agricultural land. In Uganda, it's taken place on a huge scale. So just in the time frame that I've been based in Uganda, the place has changed enormously. Most of the natural forest that was habitat for chimpanzees is gone, and in its place is agricultural land. Villages are expanding, even towns are now in areas where there used to be chimps. So there's been this huge change.
And that's a pretty big challenge. On one hand, we wouldn't want a country to stop developing and, improving its people's lives. But on the other hand, this is affecting local wildlife. But what got me thinking is, how do people view chimpanzees? Being from South America, I never really saw any outside of a zoo, and I have no idea of how a chimp should be perceived by myself and others. What I mean by that is, if I'm walking down the street and I see a dog, I'll probably think nothing of it unless it's big or if it looks angry. In fact, I'll probably try and befriend it and pet it. Or to use a wild animal from where I live as an example, if I saw a capybara. This one I probably wouldn't try to pet, but I'll just say something along the lines of, oh cool, a capybara, and move on with my life. Now, this situation would be very, very different if I'm walking down the street and I see a grizzly bear or a lion. If that happens, I'll probably think something like, I need to get out of here now. So my question is, on a scale from I should pet it like a dog to I should run from it like a lion, where do I place chimpanzees?
Chimps are a little bit special. They're incredibly intelligent. What's interesting to me is the chimps I know the best, the chimps I've studied in Bulindi since 2005, they know all the local people, there's perhaps 200 households within their home range. They know all the local people individually. They know that at this house, there's no problem. They know at this house, this person has dogs and they might chase us. They know this farmer over here might shout at us. They just in the same way that we see chimpanzees as individuals. I have no doubt they see humans as individuals. Now, for us researchers, or so for my field team who are in the forest every day. The chimps know them very, very well. They have no problem with us. Even they presumably recognise me. They've been seeing me, for many, many years. Yeah, they're completely non-aggressive. But if someone threatens them, if they see someone has intentions towards threatening them, whether chasing them or throwing stones at them, whatever it is, then chimps are smart. They can weigh up the risk. If it's like a bunch of children, like adult male chimpanzees are not going to be put off by that. Instead, they're going to chase. They're going to try and charge at the children, get them to run. And male chimps in particular, they like to show off. It's part of what they do. If they have a situation where they think, okay, this person is being annoying, they can try and chase people away. And afterwards, you can see them looking very proud of themselves. But if they detect a real threat, like perhaps, a group of hunters, not hunting chimps, but maybe hunting small mammals, a group of hunters with dogs, chimps know time to go and they leave very quickly. So I guess what I'm trying to say is they can weigh up the situation, and they also, with many local people, they see chimps and chimps see them every single day. And the chimps can walk through someone's compound nonchalantly, and the homeowner doesn't really pay them any mind. We see that a lot, but there are some people who don't like the chimps or try to chase them, and then that's when there's a potential for things to go wrong.
Okay, no need to run from them, that's good, but that doesn't mean that coexistence with chimps comes without any challenges. So I asked Dr. Matt, what's life like when you have a lot of chimps around?
They're really intelligent, they're really smart, and they're really adaptable. So what's happened is local farmers have cleared forest. The chimps learn, okay, there's new food here to eat, so they start eating people's crops. People's livelihoods are affected. People's tolerance starts decreasing, and then you have this conflict situation. So what we do, the reason why we set up the Bulindi project in the first place was to try and address some of these issues. So how can we conserve an animal like a chimpanzee, which, our closest living relative, charismatic flagship species. The international community value this animal tremendously, as does the scientific community, but they're a real pain for local people. So we try to address that problem. How can we conserve these animals outside of protected areas? They're not on government land. How can we conserve them whilst improving the lives of local people? How do you get that win-win? So that's the essence of the project.
Now, that's a really interesting and exciting challenge. Basically, we're looking into the possibility of developing a part of human civilization with economic activities, communities, and infrastructure in harmony with local wildlife. You don't come across something like that every day. In fact, when I was hearing about this project for the first time, I actually thought there was a much easier solution. And I asked Dr. Matt about it, and then I found out that actually a lot of people asked him about that as well. While hearing about the situation, I actually remembered that a very similar thing happened where I live, in Brazil. We don't have huge apes like chimps here, but we do have some small monkeys, and there were many that lived in a city park right next to my apartment many years ago. They were smaller than most dogs and mostly friendly and quite funny actually, but they were also incredibly smart and knew how to break into houses and climb into apartments to scavenge food and find things, and of course that resulted in a huge mess for anyone that was living around that area. So much that all of those monkeys had to be moved from this park to another location, which was actually much safer for them. So if coexistence between humans and chimpanzees can be problematic, and also considering that they are much bigger and stronger than the monkeys that I was talking about, why don't we just move these particular chimps to a safer area?
People say, why can't they be moved? Don't kill them, just move them to a national park, something like that. Truth is, it's not feasible. It's never been done. Chimpanzees live in social groups that contain maybe anything from around 20 chimps up to 150 that have very large territories, maybe 20-30 square miles. It would be, logistically very challenging to try and move a group of chimps, probably prohibitively expensive, and that's even if there's somewhere to put them. They're also territorial animals, so if you put let's say you're trying to translocate a group of chimps and put them in other habitat, national park, where there are other chimps, the males will fight and kill each other. So it can't really be done. So this is why what we've got to try and do is find a way to conserve the chimps. They are sentient beings, in my view, they have a right to exist. Most local people would also agree they have a right to exist. So we've got to try and conserve them where they are, but in such a way that there's not a cost for local people. Instead, there has to be a benefit.
This is where things start to get interesting because some sort of moral questions start to come up. Of course, at first glance, we all want to preserve wildlife and protect nature. But it's very easy for me to say that when I'm perfectly safe sitting behind my computer across the ocean, knowing that I can leave my house at any time and not bump into any potentially dangerous wild animals along the way. Here in Brazil, we have huge cats called jaguatiricas, which are kind of like jaguars. I definitely wouldn't like to have one as my neighbor. Of course, huge cats are often more violent than chimps and tend to attack much more than chimps, but you get the idea. We don't see a lot of people lining up to demand New Yorkers to share their city with deers or wolves.
With a fast modernizing society, is there a place for animals like chimpanzees? These are the sort of questions we have to grapple with. It's something I think about quite a lot now. For us in Europe, in the UK, it would be unacceptable to have a wild animal moving around your house. Where your kids go to school, they might run into this wild animal that is potentially dangerous. We wouldn't accept it. And yet, what's remarkable is people here are amazingly tolerant. That's another thing that often strikes me. They're amazingly tolerant. And despite the problems with chimpanzees, most people don't have any ill feeling towards the animals. So I myself, as a conservationist, I often grapple with this ethical question. So these animals are amazing; they have a right to live, but people incur a cost because of them. So coming full circle, which is why it's so important that we make things better for the people who share their landscape with these animals. It's not just a bit better; it has to be considerably better. They have to say, "Wow, this is great. We've got the chimps, and because of that, our standard of living is better, livelihood's better, maybe healthcare is better, all those sorts of things."
This podcast is brought to you by DGB Group. As a project developer of high-quality, large-scale, nature-based projects accredited by LEED verification standards, DGB's goal is to help nature flourish and prosper by assisting governments and corporations in achieving net zero and investing in nature. To learn more, access co2.expert and take the first step toward your sustainability goals. In the first part of this episode, we explored the current situation in Uganda regarding the local chimpanzees in the Bulindi region. Coexisting with these animals definitely comes with challenges, as explained by Dr. Matt McLennan. However, there are ways this can become beneficial for both chimps and humans. If the presence of these animals isn't a problem, or even better, if there is a way to make the chimp's presence and protection an asset for the local community, the chances of success start improving significantly. And that's exactly what the Bulindi Chimpanzee Habitat Restoration Project is aiming for.
The first thing we tried to do is conserve what's remaining of the natural habitat, because ultimately if there's zero forest, the long-term future prospects for the chimpanzee seem a little bleak. So the first thing we do is try to conserve the natural forest. To do that, we sponsor school children. One of the main reasons people often give, if you ask them, why have you cleared all the forest on your land? They'll say, well, we need money. We've got to pay for our kids' education 3 times a year. When we started the project, it was the first thing we did. We said, well, what if we can raise some funds, contribute to the costs of schooling your children? Would you be willing to conserve the forest? And 9 out of 10 local landowners said, yeah, that's a great idea. So we started that project at Bulindi, and it's still running. 10 years we've probably sponsored a couple of hundred school children.
The first clue this first step gives us is that the issue we're trying to solve can often be just a symptom or a consequence of another thing. In this case, the land clearing issue was mostly caused by a desire of the local population to improve their quality of life through education. To pay for education, they needed more money. To make more money, they were expanding their agricultural practices. But if the education variable is solved, there's already one incentive to motivate local farmers to keep from expanding their crops into the forests.
Another big one, of course, is tree planting. We've got nurseries in different places in this wider landscape. We raise different kinds of trees. So we raise indigenous trees, local forest trees for enrichment planting, but we also raise fast-growing exotics to give so that people can plant woodlots. Because if you say to local people, don't cut down any more of the natural trees, it's important for the chimps. Well, where are they getting their wood for cooking, for construction? So they have to have an alternative. So we give people tree seedlings free for woodlots. So they've got a source of wood. And for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been promoting coffee. We raise coffee, and we've been encouraging farmers to plant coffee. Coffee is really good as a livelihood option for farmers, particularly those living in the chimp areas, because most of the commercial crops that farmers grow, like sugarcane, banana, chimps eat them. So it causes conflicts, and it's not very viable. I mean, there's no point someone investing a lot of time and energy and money to plant a field of sugarcane, and then it just gets eaten every day by the chimps. So coffee is a really good option. Chimps don't eat it, as far as I know. Other animals don't eat it either, and coffee market is on the rise in Uganda. So we've been doing that.
So if you listen to one of our previous episodes, Beyond Carbon, in which I talked to Haran Wachira about the projects DGB is developing in Kenya, you already have an idea of what Dr. Matt is talking about. All of this goes beyond just generating carbon credits and paying local farmers to use their land. With these programs, the partners are actually improving their farming practices with possible better produce, techniques, and results. They're improving their quality of life and work as a whole. That's one more benefit the projects are bringing to the local community.
We also sponsor savings groups. These are groups of local people who pool their resources and take loans from a common fund, pay back their loans. We sponsor these savings groups. They're also really popular because they give people access to that bit of capital to invest in an alternative livelihood, maybe like having a small shop or different kinds of farming that don't conflict with the chimps. As well as that, we construct water wells, boreholes, in villages where there are chimps, because many people in rural areas, they don't have easy access to water. They go to the swamp and the streams and rivers inside the forest to collect water, and they run into chimps, and then there's a potential for problems. Many children have been injured by chimps because it's often children who are tasked to go and collect water in rural Uganda.
With this holistic approach and multiple incentives, the presence of the chimps actually becomes a benefit for the local community, guaranteeing the long-term success for this project. What I found particularly interesting is that when I first heard about this specific project of protecting chimps, my mind automatically started to think about building a sanctuary or something like that. But this quote-unquote solution would probably be way more expensive and definitely would not have as many positive economic and social impacts as this project. Now, here's one last but very, very important question. What about the chimps? Yes, we are preserving and restoring their natural habitat, but is the human presence something that actually benefits the chimp living in the Bulindi area, or is it just something that they need to be aware of?
As a chimp researcher, is these chimps that live around village areas, so the chimps that are the focus of our project, on the one hand, they always behave like chimps, but they're also very different. I've also spent some time with chimpanzees in big natural forests where they're not living around villages, they're not feeding on crops. And life is very different. These chimps that live in a sort of village environment, every day they have to navigate the human world. So they've got to go feed on the mangoes or sugarcane or whatever it is, and they've got to try and avoid people, they've got to avoid dogs, they maybe got to cross a main road, The picture that's emerging is that chimpanzees are really adaptable. As long as they're not persecuted and hunted and killed, they seem to be able to survive in these changing landscapes. It's interesting, the chimpanzees that I'm familiar with, so-called village chimps, they're not in bad condition, they're not hungry. Instead, these are big chimps, and what we're seeing is they actually seem to be in better physical condition than chimps in the nearby big forest reserve. We think because their diet is so much made up from highly nutritious, high sugar human fruits that they're actually in better shape. It's interesting, and they're also reproducing very well. A female chimp in the wild normally has an interval between births of around 4 to 5 years on average. Now, some of the females that we're seeing in these village chimp groups, the interval is much shorter, like 2 to 3 years. So what we're thinking is that for a chimpanzee, yes, they've lost the habitat, they're under a bit of stress from people, but there are also some advantages from this new human world. And for younger chimpanzees, they don't know anything different. This is the world they've been brought into. They know that people can be a problem, people can be a danger, but there's also opportunity.
There are over 300 chimpanzees affected by the Bulindi Chimpanzee Habitat Restoration Project. The fact that coexistence is a benefit for both chimps and humans is something that I find particularly very exciting. We're seeing firsthand that economic development and nature conservation can work together, mutually benefiting from this partnership. And this is just the beginning, but I'm sure there's much more to come out of this collaboration. Thank you for joining us today. The Green Earth Podcast is a DGB Group Initiative. DGB is a large-scale, nature-based project developer, and our goal is to help nature flourish and prosper. If you want to read more about the Bulindi Chimpanzee Habitat Restoration Project and our other initiatives, please check our website, green.earth. The link is also in the description. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider leaving us a review. And if you know someone that might benefit from this content, we'd greatly appreciate your recommendation. I'm Pedro Zimmer, your host, and I hope to see you for the next episode of the Green Earth Podcast.